So what I will talk about then is the working poor, or low-income families, as Margaret Casey calls them, right? Does anybody here consider themselves working poor? You do? I mean, like, it's not something anyone wants to really consider themselves. Like, wants to call them consider themselves working poor, right? So the first thing I'm going to talk, when we talk about, right now, we're trying to figure out how do we build a movement. And it's incipient. We're at the very beginnings in Arizona, I think, right now, of building a historical movement here. I think there have been sufficient demographic changes in Arizona and significant political developments that, are going to make it necessary for us to get together and to build things, because right now we're in a lot of trouble. I mean, as you guys who are educators know, these budgets are miserable, and right now they're talking about tax breaks for companies is the only way we're going to get companies in here, the only way we're going to get dollars. Tax breaks means less education. This money in other pockets are protected. Education is not protected. I don't need to tell you guys all that. You all know that, but it's trouble, right? So in order to fix that, or to change it, I think what I'm going to propose, and this is the pitch, I go out every day to community leaders trying to figure out how can we work together and trying to really bring people together to push in a concerted direction. So I'm going to try out a new pitch today that I'll be using all this year if it works, right? So if it doesn't work, you'll let me know, and I won't use it anymore. But today I'm going to experiment if I can, right? So the first thing that I want to do is I want to get rid of working poor and low-income families. Let's just toss that out the door, because I think both of those are, like particularly working poor, I think it's a particularly American phrase, right? It's like this idea where you're trying to keep hold of this idea that if you work, a fair day's work gives you a fair day's pay. And it's so much just a mystery that working people are still poor. And it's like there's this desire in the United States culture to be able to hold this contradiction without resolving it, right? It's like we're a country of workers, but we also have poor people, but somehow that's got to go together because we're a great country. We're the best country in the history of the world, right? And I think in many respects that's true, but working poor, I think, is just a mystery. It doesn't get anything like, again, until I got really involved with unions, really involved with community organizations, was one angry young dude, right? And working poor did not, that's not how I felt, right? I just felt like someone had their foot on my neck. Like that's how I felt growing up, right? And all I wanted to do was get the foot off my neck, right? So instead of working poor, I want to start with the concept of underemployment. And when I say underemployment, I don't mean just not having enough money not having enough hours to be full-time, or working in Home Depot when you have a graduate degree. That's not the kind of underemployment I'm talking about. When I use underemployment, I'm actually borrowing a concept that was from a book written in 1972, or published in 1972 by Walter Rodney. I think it's Walter Rodney? I hope that's right. Google it, doesn't matter if I'm right, you guys. If I give you enough words, you'll be able to find out if I'm right or not. But Walter Rodney wrote a book in 1972 called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And I read this when I was studying for my orals for my doctoral dissertation, right? And the book made 4 points, right? And again, I'm trying to draw a connection between underdevelopment in this book and underemployment in our context, right? So the book made 4 points. First of all, was that Africa was not this dark, primitive, underdeveloped continent before they were conquered by Europe in the West. That Africa was a developed society. They had many developed societies, empires, sophisticated empires that existed well before any kind of contact with Europeans, and certainly before conquest by Europeans. That was the first point, right? The second point was that when Europe conquered Africa, and again, the United States over time has played some part in that too, when Europe conquered Africa, they did so not because they had some moral superiority or enlightened culture or divine right, but simply had better military technology, right? That's it. They had more firepower and they had a navy. And that's why they were able to conquer Africa. It had nothing to do with being a more sophisticated society, a more just society, a more enlightened society, right? And I think when you're talking about myths and facts, this, for me, is the greatest debunking book I ever read. It totally blew my mind when I read it, right? So the third point was that the wealth of the industrialized nations, the United States, Germany, Britain, France, all these nations, would not have been possible without the dismantling of African societies, the enslavement of African people, and the exploitation of those African people over centuries, right? And that there was a root of the richness of the developed world in the exploitation of Africa. Right? It wasn't this this separate process where Europe developed and Africa didn't develop, right? And that was the fourth point, which is that underdevelopment was not the lack of development or the failure to develop. It was an active process that was integral to the development of the Western culture, the Western economy, and the Western world.